I want you to imagine something very simple. What if you could forget? Not the small things, not the ordinary memories that slip away with time, but everything painful, everything heavy, everything that ever made you feel too much. Now imagine that kind of gift isn't a blessing at all. It's a supernatural bargain by a ghostly devil, and every bargain has a cost. This is The Haunted Man and the Ghost Bargain, written by Charles Dickens, first published in 1848. A haunting psychological ghost story about a deeply melancholy chemistry professor who desired to be free from suffering, but with an outcome that is something far more unsettling than the pain itself. It's a Victorian horror tinged story about memory, loss, and what remains when the heart is stripped clean. This is episode 10 of the Lunar Rebel Horror Podcast. If you enjoy these darker atmospheric tales, please take a moment to like and subscribe. It truly supports the channel and helps me continue bringing you more stories like this. Now, get comfortable and let the story unfold. Part 1. The Gift Bestowed. Everybody said he looked like a haunted man. Who could have seen his hollow cheek, his sunken brilliant eye, his grim, black-clad figure, his grizzled hair hanging like tangled seaweed about his face, and not agreed? Who could have observed his manner, taciturn, thoughtful, gloomy, always retreating, never at ease, without feeling certain that this man carried something dark, a dark companion within him? His name was Redlaw. He was a learned chemist, a celebrated teacher, a man whose lectures filled great lecture halls with admiring students. But on this particular winter's night, Christmas Eve, he sat alone in his inner chamber, part library, part laboratory, gazing into the fire as the wind howled outside and shadows gathered thick around him. The room itself seemed haunted. The shadow of his lamp made a monstrous shape upon the wall. The reflection of his glass vessels trembled in the firelight, and the old stone building around him, ancient, smoke-blackened, squeezed on all sides by the growing city, groaned and echoed with every gust of wind, as though the past itself were restless. His servant, the cheerful and bustling William Swidger, arrived with his dinner, followed by his calm and kind-faced wife Millie and her father-in-law, old Philip, 87 years old and carrying an armload of fresh holly to decorate the rooms. "Merry Christmas, sir, and Happy New Year," said old Philip brightly, distributing his holly sprigs about the room. "Have had a pretty many of 'em myself, and take the liberty of wishing 'em. I'm 87. Redlaw watched the old man with a strange, probing intensity. "Have you had so many that were merry and happy?" "Aye, sir, ever so many," said Philip. "And you remember them well, all those years?" "Oh, many and many. The berries, the frost, the faces of children. I can see them as clearly as if they were here now." The old man smiled at his sprig of holly. "It's a blessed thing at 87 to have such a memory." "Merry and happy," Redlaw murmured to himself, and his eyes held no peace at all. Before the Swidgers departed, quiet Millie took Redgrave aside to tell him something she'd been reluctant to share. There was a sick young student, one of his own, living anonymously in poverty nearby, too proud and too secretive to ask for help. She had been looking after him herself, carrying him food and tidying his poor lodgings, because that was simply the sort of woman she was. He said that of all the people in the world, she said gently, he would not wish to be known to you or receive help from you, though he studies in your class. I trust to your honor completely. After they left, the room turned darker. The holly on the wall withered, and from the deepening shadow behind his chair, something came. It had his features, his grizzled hair, his bright, sunken eyes, but its face was leaden, colorless, a ghastly copy of himself, cold as death, silent as a grave. This was the phantom, the something that had haunted him for years. Here again, said Redlaw, without even turning. Here again, replied the phantom. I see you in the fire, said Redlaw. I hear you in music, in the wind, in the dead stillness of the night. Why do you come here to haunt me? I come as I am called, said the ghost. And then it spoke in Redlaw's own voice, with Redlaw's own memories, of a life of hardship and struggle, of a beloved sister lost too soon, of a dear friend who had betrayed him and stolen the woman he loved. It recounted every wound, every sorrow, every wrong that had accumulated in Redlaw's heart over a lifetime. Thus, said the phantom, I bear within me a sorrow and a wrong. Memory is my curse. And if I could forget my sorrow and my wrong, I would. Mocker, cried Redlaw, leaping to his feet. Why do I always hear that taunt? Forbear, said the spectre, raising its hand. Lay a hand on me and die. Redlaw stopped. He stood trembling, staring at the thing. Hear what I offer, the phantom said. Forget the sorrow, wrong, and trouble you have known. I have the power to cancel the remembrance, to leave only faint, confused traces that will fade entirely. Say the word. Is it done? What shall I lose? Redlaw asked, fearful. What else will pass from my memory? No knowledge, no learning, nothing but the chain of feelings and associations that grew from those painful remembrances. Those will go. Redlaw agonized for a moment. He thought of all the years of grief, of bitterness, of a wound that was never fully healed. He thought of the old man Philip, his memory a tissue of sorrow too. He thought of all of mankind, weighted down by recollections of loss and wrong. Would not all human beings choose to forget their sorrows if they could? Yes, he said at last. I will forget my sorrow, wrong, and trouble. Is it done? Said the spectre. It is. The phantom's voice rose to fill the room. That gift that I have given you, you shall give again, go where you will, without recovering the power you have yielded up, You shall henceforth destroy its like in all whom you approach. Go, be its benefactor. Freed from such remembrance, carry involuntarily the blessing of such freedom with you." And the phantom was gone. In the ringing silence, a cry reached Redlaw's ears, a small, lost cry from somewhere deep in the old building. He caught up his lamp, drew aside a heavy curtain, and held the light aloft. Something rushed past him out of the darkness and crouched in the corner of the room. A wild, ragged child, no more than 10 years old, with bright, fierce eyes and naked, bleeding feet. A creature who had never been a child in any real sense, half feral, knowing, watchful. "I'll bite," said the boy, "if you hit me." There had been a time when such a sight would have wrung Redlaw's heart. Now, he looked upon the boy with a cold, hollow detachment he couldn't quite explain. He led the child back to Millie's warm fireside and returned to his locked room alone. Part 2. The Gift Diffused. The next morning, Redlaw moved through the world carrying his bargain with him, and the phantom had told the truth. Wherever he went, whatever he touched, the gift spread like frost. In a small cluttered shop on the edge of the college grounds, the Tetterby family was beginning to feel it. Mr. Tetterby was a cheerful, if put upon, newspaper seller with a large family, a good wife, and a famous baby called Moloch, who required constant tending. The Tetterbys were poor, but they were loving. Then, Redlaw passed through their home, and something shifted. Mrs. Tetterby, who had declared the night before with full grateful heart that she would not have traded her life for anything, now looked at her husband with cool, calculating eyes. She began to tally what she might have been, what she might have had if she had chosen differently. The children she had loved began to irritate her. The warm kitchen began to feel like a cage. Mr. Tetterby, for his part, stared at his wife as if he could not remember what had ever attracted him to her. He was surly, she was sharp. The children quarreled viciously. The baby, eternally cutting teeth, screamed into the void. Something precious had gone out of the Tetterby house, and none of them could have said what it was, only that the world felt bleak and cold and not worth the trouble. Deeper into the night, the wild boy led Redlaw to a crumbling lodging house on the edge of the city, where the very poorest people scraped out their lives. There, in an upstairs room, old Philip's eldest son George lay dying, a man ruined by his own vices over 40 years, who had been the pride of his mother's heart. Old Philip sat by the bed and wept, and spoke of the boy George had once been, saying his prayers at his mother's knee, running through the fields bright with life. Redlaw watched. Old Philip's memories of that lost innocence were the only thing still giving George any reason to feel remorse, any thread of connection to the person he might have been. Then, Redlaw drew too close. The wandering hand, the clouded face, and George, who had been weeping, who had been softened, who had been on the very edge of asking for forgiveness, suddenly hardened before their eyes. "What have you been doing to me?" he snarled at Redlaw. "I lived bold, and I mean to die bold. To the devil with you!" And old Philip, who had trembled with love a moment before, looked at his dying son as if at a stranger. "That's no son of mine," he said, childishly confused. "My children are pleasant to look at. I'm 87. I've had a power of pleasant times. I don't remember. I don't care. I don't care a bit." William Swidger, who had always been patient and devoted, looked at his old father with dull impatience. "I don't know who you are," he muttered. Redlaw fled the house in horror. "I am infectious," he gasped into the winter air. "I am charged with poison for my own mind and the minds of all mankind. Selfishness and ingratitude spring up in my blighting footsteps. Everywhere, the phantom's words followed him, blowing through the snow and the cold wind. The gift that I have given, you shall give again. Go where you will." Part 3. The Gift Reversed. Night deepened. Redlaw locked himself in his room with only the wild boy for company, for the boy, strangely, was untouched. The phantom's power had no grip on him. When Redlaw looked into the child's face, he saw his own emptied expression reflected back, and understood, with a chill deeper than the winter air, why. The boy had no memories of tenderness to lose. He had been abandoned to cruelty from birth, had known no love or safety or comfort. He was already what Redlaw had chosen to become. Millie knocked at the door, again and again, urgent and frightened, telling him what was happening. The Titterbees at each other's throats, the dying George, beyond reaching, William cold to his own father. She begged Redlaw to help her. He could not open the door. And then, in the heavy silence, the Christmas music began again. Distant and sweet, carried on the night air, and something in it reached Redlaw where nothing else could. He rose to his feet. His hands shook. His eyes filled with tears. He could not say why. He did not know what he had lost, only that the music told him sorrowfully that something of great value was gone. When the last chord faded, the phantom stood before him again, but different now. Beside it, in its shadow hand, was the shadow of Millie. "Is it my doom," asked Redlaw, "to seek her out and destroy her goodness as I have destroyed everyone else?" "Seek her out," said the phantom. "I have said no more." "Can I undo what I have done?" Redlaw begged. "No," said the phantom, "but she, unknowingly, can." The phantom pointed to the sleeping boy. "This child," it said, "is the final, complete portrait of a human creature stripped of all such remembrances as you have given up. No memory of sorrow, wrong, or trouble can enter here, because this child was abandoned from birth and never had a single human tenderness to build from. All within him is barren wilderness, and all within the man who has surrendered his memories is the same. Its voice filled the room. Woe to such a man. Woe tenfold to any nation that lets its children grow up this way. By hundreds, by thousands. Redlaw knelt on the floor of his darkened room, clasping his hands, and his heart cracked open. At sunrise, he went to find Millie. He found her already at work. She had located the ruined man who dying George had worried over. A man named Longford, the long-absent, disgraced father of the student Redlaw had visited. She had talked him back from the edge of his own destruction, and now she brought Redlaw to him. I may tell you why it seems to me a good thing, Millie said quietly, to remember the wrongs that have been done to us. Yes, said Redlaw, that we may forgive them. He looked up at her. A ray of clearer light seemed to enter his mind, the first in a long, dark night. He looked at the ruined man and found something almost like recognition stirring. Longford spoke humbly, without excuses. He had wronged Redlaw years ago. He knew it. He carried it. He asked only for forgiveness, not absolution, not redemption, just the knowledge that at the end it had been given. Redlaw, guided by Millie's words and Millie's presence, gave it. At that moment, as he held Millie's hand in his, surrounded by the morning light, his memory came flooding back. All of it. The sister he had loved, the friend who had betrayed him, the grief and the wrong, and all the long years of carrying both, all the sorrow he had tried to bargain away. He fell to his knees. "O thou," he cried, "who through the teachings of pure love has graciously restored me, receive my thanks and bless her." The Tetterbys, that same morning, felt it too, as Millie walked down their street and the children ran to meet her. The hard frost that had settled over the household simply dissolved. Mr. Tetterby looked at his wife, plain, stout, aging, good, beloved, and couldn't fathom what cold dream had possessed him. Mrs. Tetterby clung to her husband and wept. The children were themselves again. Even the baby seemed briefly to not be cutting teeth. "How could I have ever behaved so?" sobbed Mrs. Tetterby. "How could I?" Her husband held her close and had no answer because the feeling had been just as real while it lasted and just as impossible to explain now that it was gone. By Christmas Day, there was a great dinner in the old dinner hall of the college. More Swidgers than anyone could count. The Tetterbys with all their noisy children, the young student with the girl he loved, old Philip beaming at 87 years of well-kept memories. Even the wild boy was there, sitting close to Millie's chair, watching the other children with uncertain eyes, beginning, very slowly, to learn the strange, unfamiliar thing that they were offering him. Redlaw sat among them all. His memory was his again, every sorrow, every wrong, every loss. It was not comfortable. It had never been comfortable. But it was his, and it was him. And without it, he was nothing. He looked up at the old portrait on the paneled wall. A sedate gentleman in a peaked beard and a ruff, painted centuries ago, who had once left money in his will for Holly to be hung in these very halls at Christmas. Beneath the portrait, as clear as a spoken voice, were the words he had read 100 times without ever truly understanding them. Lord, keep my memory green. And now, the story settles. Thank you so much for spending this time with me. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider liking and subscribing. It helps the channel grow, and it means so much more than you know. But for now, see the shadows soften and feel what once felt heavy begin to drift quietly away. Let your thoughts slow and allow yourself to rest. I'll meet you again in the next story.